Thank you for coming. I'd like to thank the Science and Technology Club for having me here, and welcome to my show called Ancient Egypt Revealed. Of course, the alternate title for this show is just why did those ancient Egyptians build so many ruins? Today we won't be making fun of any mummies, no way. We won't be talking about any conspiracy theories, or we won't make fun of any pyramids like pyramid schemes or food pyramids. So, today we'll be talking about the Old Kingdom and their afterlife beliefs, how they believed in the soul, how they mummified their dead, and the pyramids they used to put them in. In the Middle Kingdom, we'll talk about how society was organized, the hieroglyphics, that is, how they wrote, which were about kings and queens, and pharaohs, and gods and goddesses they believed in. Also in the New Kingdom, then we'll be talking about famous pharaohs, queens, temples, and tombs. The ancient name for Egypt is Kenet, or Black Land, for the fertile soil that the Nile deposited every June through August. The climate was wetter than today. It was really a narrow strip of paradise that's bordered the Nile River with a large delta that emptied into the Mediterranean. Today we'll be talking about that area, and Upper Egypt first, where the delta is. It's called Upper Egypt because it's called Lower Egypt because it's lower in elevation where the delta is, pardon me on that. And in the Lower Egypt, we'll be talking about Alexandria, an ancient capital on the coast, Cairo, the current capital, Saqqara, where the first pyramids are built, Giza, where the famous pyramids are built, and then we'll come down to the Upper Egypt, which is really the southern Nile, and we'll be discussing, because upper in elevation, we'll be talking about Amarna, an ancient capital, 200 miles south, Thebes, which is currently Luxor, where the temples of the Akhenaten temples and the Luxor temple is, and the Valley of the Kings. There are 31 dynasties or ruling families divided into three kingdoms. The Old Kingdom, which was the age of the pyramids, was from 2650 to 2130 BC. The Middle Kingdom, or the Classical period, was from 2040 to 1640 BC. And the New Kingdom time, that is the Golden Age of Egypt, was between 1550 and 1070 BC. The science we're talking about today is archaeology mixed in with cultural anthropology. Around 3100 BC, a united Egypt emerged, ruled by a single pharaoh, and occupying the banks of the Nile. Two strong areas emerged, that is Upper Egypt, merging with Lower Egypt to form a single state. Here are some events from the Old Kingdom which included peace, stability, pyramid and monument building, and the rise of a very structured and organized society, with a pharaoh as head of it and his prime minister, the vizier, next in charge. The pharaohs had a central religious role. Pharaohs projected power by acquiring new lands. A pharaoh's duties included ritual activities to ensure the fertility of the land and to be sure the sun crossed the sky every day, as if it wouldn't do that. Death was an uplifting transformation. There was pursuit of life after death. The ancient Egyptians believed there were two parts to the soul. First, the ba, or the conscience, or the collection of traits that made the individual unique, similar to a personality that lived after the body died. It was part of the soul that had more freedom to follow the gods and was in a bird-like fashion. The second part, the ka, was a spiritual entity or physical soul that followed a person like a shadow all through life. It was a life force that left after the physical body, but it could eat, drink, and move around. This is why mummification was so important. If your body decomposed, your spiritual double or ka would die. Then the deceased lost a chance for eternal life. The ba and ka needed to work jointly together in the afterlife. Now, the Book of the Dead was the book that helped the spirit reach the underworld and pass the test to reach afterlife. This book helped them to navigate in the underworld with prayers, incantations, and spells. It was not sinister, evil, or malevolent. It was a helpful guide. If the dead could reach paradise, they could live forever. Now, the afterlife was an idealistic version of life with no death, taxes, wars, or major problems like politicians or real estate agents. The ancient Egyptians were not obsessed with death, rather they loved life and wished to continue on into the afterlife. The Ka, or life force, shown below with the arms outstretched, would be united with the Ba, or soul, that is, the bird-like creature. So the body needed to be preserved through mummification. Just think, you are full of preservatives, with no added hormones or antibiotics, are free-range and cage-free. Once a person's soul reached the underworld, a jury of gods would weigh its misdeeds against a feather. If it weighed the same, then the soul had eternal life. If the soul was heavier than a feather, that is too much wrongdoing, then the soul was obliterated. With good deeds, the soul went forward to navigate the underworld. And this kind of attitude helped towards domestic tranquility and civility in their society, and later on we'll discuss how this applied to slaves. In this painting, the soul to the very left is being taken by Anubis. In charge of this process was the soul being weighed on a scale against the feather. Now, when the king died, he was ferried across the Nile to the west bank where embalmers worked. Only those who could afford it were buried on the west bank. West meaning sunset or death, east meaning sunrise or rebirth. Embalming was a 70-day process. Extensive knowledge of anatomy was essential. To preserve the internal organs, they were removed from the body to stop decay. The brain was pulled out of the nostrils with the instrument shown below. A 4-inch incision was made in the abdomen to remove the internal intestines. After removing the internal organs, each organ was placed in a jar called a canopic jar. Embalmers then washed out the abdominal cavity with myrrh and linen. And myrrh is shown below, it's the yellow substance. Next to it, the dark brown substance is frankincense. The body was immersed with salts, dehydrated with salts, actually shown in the middle left, and was immersed in salts inside and out. This drying out process took 40 days. Once the body was dehydrated, then for 30 days, it was anointed with oils and resins and wrapped with linen and frankincense and myrrh to make it smell good. Lastly, ritual prayers were performed over the body. Now, the ancient Egyptians also mummified cats and birds. Cats were revered creatures in the society. And then the souls of these animals would be used as pets in the afterlife. Often these mummified remains would be given to the priest to sacrifice to the gods. Priests would often collect hundreds of these mummified animals. Of course, pharaohs needed to be buried in something. So early pharaohs at first were buried in mustabas, or mud brick box-shaped tombs. The first step pyramid was built for Djoser, shown top left, in Saqqara, Egypt, 4,700 years ago. He was the third dynasty king in the Old Kingdom. This pyramid is 197 feet tall, with 6 step layers, or 6 stacked mustabas, one right on top of each other, and composed of 11.5 million cubic feet of stone and clay. There are 3.5 miles of tunnels dug underneath the pyramid complex, and in those tunnels, the walls were lined with tiles and mosaic patterns and colored stones to remind the pharaoh that he was in his own temple, in his own palace. And at the bottom of this pyramid, there is a shaft that goes 90 feet down. And at the bottom of that shaft, Djoser is buried there along with 11 of his daughters. Imhotep, shown to the left, is the architect who designed Djoser's step pyramid. Imhotep was a prime minister and the world's first named architect. He was a scribe, poet, doctor, sculptor, and carpenter. He was chief vizier under 4 different pharaohs. Later he became a saint, demigod, and he was even worshipped by early Christians. Another Old Kingdom pharaoh, Snefru, shown top left, made the first true smooth-faced true pyramid. He built the bent pyramid, so called because the angle of the pyramid starts at a 56-degree angle and then goes up to then goes down to a 43-degree angle. This is because they ran out of time to make the pyramid. Another pyramid was called the red pyramid because of the color of the stone used. The sides were also built at a 43-degree angle. Snefru's son, Khufu, shown bottom left, made the first great pyramid of Giza, and he learned and improved from his father's work. Actually, Khufu's half-brother, Andaf, and the prime minister, or vizier, Hemenu, designed the first great pyramid, which was 481 feet tall and is now 455 feet tall, and was the tallest building in the world for 4,000 years. It contains 2,300,000 blocks and weighs 6 million tons. Its sides are built at a 52-degree angle, more daring than the previous ones made. The length of each side is 756 feet and is perfectly oriented toward a cardinal direction. Each side perfectly faces north, south, east, and west on a perfectly flattened site, which means all four corners are at the same level. Its base is 570,000 square feet, which is comparable to some homes here on golf courses. The entrance to King Khufu's burial chamber, shown bottom right, is 60 feet up and on the north side. His burial chamber is 600 square feet and rises 20 feet tall with stone supporting beams at the top. The internal temperature is 68 degrees and is a constant temperature. The entrance to the king's burial chamber is shown to the bottom right, which is 153 feet long, with 20 feet tall as you enter the king's chamber. When you enter the king's chamber, at the bottom left, you will see a granite stone sarcophagus that was put there when the pyramids were made. The air shafts in the pyramid line up directly with some stars in the nighttime sky, and there are no remains of Khufu left in his pyramid, as it was robbed in the 4th century AD by Arabs. The only thing left is really a small statue that's this tall, it's 3 inches tall, with his name inscribed on it. There are 2 other pyramids of Giza, and I'll get to those in a minute. All the great pyramids of Giza needed stone masons, skilled craftsmen, scribes, architects, and engineers. They needed to have officials there for record keeping. Altogether, and the current theory is, 20,000 workers were needed to build the first pyramid. Slaves did not build pyramids. Much work was done when the Nile was high because farm fields were too flooded to farm. The workers had a city near the pyramid, shown at the top left, to house and feed them. They were fed well. Workers drank beer made from barley and ate bread. Daily 4,000 loaves of bread were needed to be baked, shown at the bottom right. And many of the pictures today are taken directly from tomb paintings to illustrate and validate points made. They also made thousands of gallons of beer daily. Vats and bread molds were found. They killed cattle, sheep, and goats to meet the daily demand of 2 tons of meat. Cattle was brought in at the Nile, shown bottom left, at a nearby harbor. It was basically a whole support staff city. The current theory is that it took 20 years to build the first pyramid, and the current theory is that ramps were used up the side of the pyramid as it grew taller. After they got 1/3 of the pyramid built, a ramp then circled around the top as it got taller. A quarry a few hundred yards from the pyramid was used for the limestone blocks that the core is primarily composed of. Each block weighed at least 5,000 pounds, some weighed more, and they put one in place every few minutes. More than a dozen blocks were placed every hour. Channel marks, shown above left, were found in quarries where the stones were removed. They moved the blocks on wooden sleds with water poured in front over sand. This lubrication method cut the workforce by half. And as we can see on this painting, we can see 172 men pulling a multi-ton statue that's 30 feet tall. A worker on the front foot of the statue is pouring water down in the front to lubricate and ease the way. This painting sums up a lot about ancient civilizations, and it took a lot of blood, sweat, toil, and tears mixed in with cooperative effort to get the job done. And yes, as a society, the Egyptians built these things themselves. The pyramid builders used copper chisels, stone tools, but no wheel and no pulley. They used dolerite balls, shown at the bottom, which weighed about 12 pounds, to pound down the blocks at a rate of 5 millimeters per hour. They'd have teams doing this, that is, 3 and 4 teams. One team would work, the other team would rest, and they'd go at it during the day. However, this was hazardous work which caused impaired hearing, vision loss due to flying stone chips, breathing issues because of dust, and the repetitive motion caused arm ailments. They also used these other tools made of stone, copper, and wood. Remember, this was a super team effort to build the pyramids. There had to be thousands of people employed daily to get water, to make rope, to get the barley, to make the beer, to make tools, to sharpen tools, to get the wheat, to make it into dough, to bake the bread, to take care of the cattle, to kill the cattle, to butcher the meat, to cook the meat, and serve it to the people. There had to be people in the limestone quarries taking out the limestone. People then making that limestone into blocks, shaping them correctly, and then taking those blocks to the pyramid. There had to be scribes and engineers and architects there to align the blocks perfectly. And At the time of the pyramids being built, this was the reason for many people's existence and was the only source of employment. And to get a job, all they had to do was click on gopharaoh.com. Khufu's pyramid, the first great pyramid of Giza, is aligned true north to 1/10 of a degree. To get the true cardinal directions, they used a Polaris star for alignment and orientation, and a circular wall was used for measurement. As I said, they pulled a sledge over a lubricated surface with rope. The rope was made from papyrus stalks. They used a mallet to pound the stalks into fibers, dried it, and twisting it to make strands, shown bottom right. They then twisted the strands in opposite directions to make rope. An interesting side note, they found a boat under Khufu's pyramid that's 142 feet long, unassembled, and made of cedar. It was a funeral boat made to sail to the west. Another smaller boat was underneath this pyramid, out of public view. The second great pyramid, was built for Khafre. This is the one with the pronounced cap. It was 20 feet smaller than the first, which is way in the background, but it was meant to look bigger at that rate, and was 707 feet on each side. Khafre also built the Sphinx. The third great pyramid was built for Menkaure, who was Khufu's grandson. That's the one closest to us, the largest one, and it's topping out at 215 to 220 feet. So the three satellite pyramids in front, those are small step pyramids for the queens of these pharaohs. So really the pyramids of Giza concern three generations. Khufu in the background, his son Khafre, and Khafre's son closest to us, Menkaure. All the pyramids of Giza were finished with a smooth outer casing of white limestone. This came from a quarry near Cairo and was shipped by boat to Giza. It took 4 days to get there. There may or may not have been a system of canals to take it further inland. This outer covering, or casing, was removed by the Middle Ages to build other buildings. The Egyptians used the shape of the pyramid to make it look like rays of light were coming from the heavens and called the pyramids Akhet, or glorious light. By the 5th dynasty, there were smaller pyramids. By the New Kingdom time, that is about the 18th dynasty, pharaohs chose to be buried in less extravagant tombs located south of Giza in the Valley of the Kings. Now, currently there are 100 million people living in Egypt today. Egypt history goes back 7,000 years from new archaeological evidence found this year. They have a broad, rich, and diverse history, and to say their accomplishments were done with help or assistance from previous unknown, undocumented, and unproven sources sullies their heritage and cheapens our intellect. Below right is Dr. Zawi Hawass, former director of the pyramids. He is the most prominent Egyptologist in the world. He has published dozens of papers on the pyramids, been involved in dozens of archaeological expeditions, and has appeared in dozens of videos about the pyramids, including National Geographic ones. He is the go-to guy of the pyramids. Whenever heads of state come to Egypt, he personally escorts them through the pyramid complex. So imagine coming up to this man, this knowledgeable Egyptian, and telling him that his ancient ancestors didn't have the brains, the wherewithal, and the ideas to make these wonderful monuments. And if you told him that, just guess where he would tell you where to go. Below left is Tahrir Square in downtown Cairo, where thousands of people gathered to voice their opinions in massive demonstrations. Picture yourself going into this crowd and in Arabic telling these people that their ancient ancestors stood on the shoulders of giants, that they needed assistance to build these tombs and temples we were talking about today. If you told them that, just guess how many pieces you'd be torn into. So when we tell other cultures that they didn't have the ideas to make the legacies they left behind, this is called cultural entitlement. This elitism or arrogance is expressed by a number of groups and organizations when talking about other ancient civilizations. Moving on. Not only did Khafre build the second great pyramid, he built the Sphinx. The Sphinx was the body of a lion with the head of a pharaoh in the likeness of Pharaoh Khafre, who was 4th king of the 4th dynasty. A laser 3D scan of the Sphinx's face shows it is indeed that of Khafre, whose sculpture is in the museum in Cairo, shown to the upper left. The Sphinx faces sunrise and guards the tombs of Giza. The Sphinx was built around the time of the second great pyramid because A, he had to guard something, and B, it was already there, and B, he was built by the Egyptians because he has a massive, multi-ton Egyptian headdress on him. The Sphinx is 241 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 66 feet tall. The eyes alone are 6 feet tall. He originally had a long braided beard, and his body was painted red, his beard blue, and the headdress yellow. The Sphinx symbolizes strength and wisdom, and was carved on the bedrock from the Giza Plateau. There is concern about the Sphinx. There was erosion on the west side of it, and this comes from the fact that there was a Nile tributary not too far from Giza, which is how they transported materials to the pyramids from far away. And this tributary overflowed dozens of times and eroded part of the Sphinx. This tributary, because of the braided part of the Nile Delta, then moved over centuries and millenniums and moved further east about a kilometer. So this is how it explains that. And the Sphinx was covered up to its neck in sand, and only 150 years ago, the sand was removed. It took years to remove the sand. The Middle Kingdom was from 2055 to 1650 BC, and Amenhotep was the early pharaoh of the Middle Kingdom. He ruled from the capital city of Thebes. He defeated 10th dynasty rulers who controlled Lower Egypt. He helped reunify the country. Not many Middle Kingdom pyramids survived, as they were not as well constructed as those of the Old Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom was a flowering classical period of culture, literature, and language. During this period, Egypt was separated into nomes, which were religious and administrative districts. Nomarchs ruled provinces similar to feudal organizations. By the end of the Middle Kingdom, the central government collapsed, and the Hatshepsut, or what the Egyptians called foreign invaders, took over. They were from Palestine up north and had superior weapons made of bronze and iron. Now let's talk about family life now. Most families were monogamous. However, if the family was rich, then it was polygamous. The husband could have several wives with the chief wife. Their skin color was not white, not black, but in between to help with sun exposure. This was the hierarchy of their society. Children were considered a blessing from the gods, and the girls married at age 12, and so did the boys, all through arranged marriages. Women had some progressive rights. They could enter prenuptial agreements, buy and sell property, make wills, enter legal contracts, divorce and remarry, and they got equal pay for work. The vizier near the top was the chief minister. Also near the top, the nobles were government officials, regional governors, priests, and military commanders. And about the soldiers, that is the military, the foot soldiers were divided into charioteers, infantry, and archers. They used a composite bow that shot 600 feet. They used hard leather straps for armor and shields, but I don't think they had full metal ones shown top left. In times of peace, the army worked in the fields, helping out during planting and harvesting times. They also helped in the construction of palaces, tombs, and temples. They were all-purpose handymen. The pharaoh was the head of the army, and there were two generals, one representing Upper Egypt and another general for Lower Egypt. Each army had three branches: charioteers, infantry, and archers, and navy, let's say that again. They had infantry, charioteers, and navy. The generals were close relatives of the pharaohs. The divisions were named after gods, and they hired mercenaries. And we'll talk more about this when we talk about Ramesses the Great in a little while. The high priests were in charge of embalming. They advised the pharaohs and oversaw religious ceremonies, as shown below left. Temple priests were responsible for smaller temples. Each temple was home to a different god. Priests were men who could read and write. To be a scribe, you had to attend a special 4-year school. They were educated and upper class. They practiced writing on papyrus or limestone. And this is how they made paper, by cutting stalks of papyrus, shown bottom here, and with that papyrus, pouring water on it, pounding it, drying it, and forming it into a crude paper. To get ink and paint, they crushed and grinded colored minerals to a powder. It took years to learn hieroglyphics. The merchants could exchange products like grains for goods, and when Egypt acquired new territory, more natural resources could be obtained to trade with. Artists and craftsmen made amulets, jewelry, tomb paintings, funeral jars, painted pottery, figurines, painted scenes, ivory goods, weapons, boats, and goods to protect them in this life and the afterlife. There were also stonemasons, carpenters, and design artists. Now, about the way they drew, the artists drew the head, eyes, legs, and feet as if you were looking at them from the side. The shoulders and chest they drew as if you were looking at them at the front. That's why when they drew people, they looked so stiff. Now, there are two gods that we'll be talking about today in a little bit. This is Horus, the Avian deity, and this is Isis, over here to the very left, and she's the goddess of fertility and magic, and we'll be discussing the gods and goddesses in a bit for now. The peasants farm, and there were a few grazing lands for cattle, but they grew grain like wheat, and barley was grown for beer. They also utilized the plow shown upper left. Now, when Rome conquered Egypt in 30 BC, there was so much grain grown in this area that it was able to feed Rome for 4 months out of every year. Really, the Nile Delta was the breadbasket of the Mediterranean. Flax was grown for linen, taxes were imposed on wheat and vegetables, and slaves were treated more like servants than slaves. That's because if slaves were mistreated, then the souls of the person that would own them would be too heavy to have an afterlife. The houses were simple sun-dried mud brick houses for the average person. The noblemen had larger houses with 3 areas, a reception area and private quarters. Some houses were 2 and 3 stories tall, with the bottom floor for business and reception. The top 2 floors were private for residents, and the flat roofs were for people to sleep on. The inside of the home was painted. There was little wood, but mats covered windows and doors, and they bathed in the Nile River, and sewage existed in rivers and pits. The clothes were white linen to be light and cool. Men wore kilts, and women wore short dresses. The children were often nude in the summer. They wore jewelry, necklaces, bracelets. The women had pierced ears, large amulets, and carried cosmetic cases for their makeup. They used cones of lard, shown at the top left, which they put on their head, which melted on them to make them smell better. They had makeup for eyes, lips, cheeks, and nails. Toothpaste was made from dead mice. Dead mice? Now that's really Mickey Mouse. The earliest hieroglyphs are 5,200 years old, and most represented consonants or certain emphatically pronounced vowels. Hieroglyphs means holy writings, and they were usually about the ongoings of what the kings and queens did in their life. And there are also, I mean, some of the pictures stood for the objects they represented, but they also stood for sounds. They were logographic, with each symbol sometimes representing an entire idea or word. For example, A was a vulture, D, a hand, F, an Egyptian snake, I, same as E, which is a reed, L, a lion, N, zigzag for water, P, a square stool, R, a mouth, S, linen folded over, T, bun, U and W, a quail chick, X, a basket with folded linen, and Z, a doorbell. The sound KH was a ball of string. The sound SH was a rectangle for lamb. Now, this hieroglyph, this is the original hints for Heloise column that tells what to do with extra mummy linen wrappings and how to use them as liners for cupcakes and muffins. And this hieroglyph is really a ad trying to sell political bumper stickers that you could attach to your chariot. These bumper stickers, however, there's a disclaimer on it saying that they make the chariot veer widely to the right or widely to the left. The Rosetta Stone was deciphered by Champollion in 1799 when the French invaded Egypt 220 years ago. It had 3 sections to it. Hieroglyphics at the top, in the middle Demotic with a cursive form of Egyptian language, and the bottom is in Greek. The stone tablet served as a translating guide to break the hieroglyphics code. The Rosetta Stone declared the priests agreed to crown Ptolemy IV as pharaoh and declare him a god in exchange for tax breaks for clergy and for temples. This was the original quid pro quo. Hieroglyphs were phased out and became extinct by 600 AD. In 333 BC, the Greek language was used after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. Demotic was really the new Egyptian script brought over by the Greeks with Alexander the Great. The Greek alphabet was used after Christianity spread about 200 AD, and starting about 700 AD, they only spoke and wrote Arabic as they had been conquered by the Arabs in about 642 AD. By 1799, no one understood Demotic or hieroglyphs as they'd been lost for 1,000 years. Now, these are some of the gods and goddesses we'll be studying next, and Isis will start with at the very top right. Isis was the wife of Osiris and god of the dead. It was also the mother goddess, the goddess of magic, fertility, motherhood, healing, and rebirth. She was a magical healer, cured the sick, and was a role model for all women. She extended help to all Egyptians. She became a cult which spread to Greece and Rome. Osiris was her husband and was king of the death and was known as the god of the underworld. His arms are crossed, signifying death, and he has a double crown system on him. The inner crown that looks like a bowling pin is really for Lower Egypt. The outer crown is for Upper Egypt, signifying the two together. After Pharaoh's death, his son, the prince, became Horus, or god of the sky, and was resurrected as a falcon. Horus was the avian deity, or son of Osiris and Isis. Horus wanted people to come together under one great ruler. With Osiris in the underworld, Horus would then move into the form to be the next ruler. That is, the prince became the king. Not only is Horus wearing a double crown system, he's carrying an ankh in his left hand. The ankh is a symbol for life. The top part is the woman's womb, the bottom part the male. Together, they make life. Anubis was a jackal dressed in black and was god of the scales. He weighed the soul to see if a person was worthy or not. Some of his roles involved guarding the body, guiding the soul, and protecting the tomb. Early pharaohs associated themselves with Horus and the sun god Ra, but gradually the cult of Osiris, king of the dead, became dominant. The ruler needed to be immortal. The Egyptians invented religion to explain natural events such as floods, famines, earthquakes, droughts, and even death. We believe the ancient Egyptians were superstitious about these gods they believed. However, this superstition still exists in today's world. Just look at your homeowner's insurance policy and look under acts of God. These are really times when nature overwhelms us. The word miracle is so ubiquitous and prosaic, it's lost any meaning, and when something is mysterious, it is now labeled as mystical and spiritual. The New Kingdom was from 1570 to 1080 BC. During this time, Egypt had a strong and prosperous economy. Architectural and artistic achievements abounded along with religious fervor. This was the golden age of Egypt. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom were buried in the Valley of the Kings, shown upper right, which was their new burial site. They were just tombs cut in rock. By the 20th dynasty, the Hatshepsut, or the foreign invaders, were driven out, and more land was seized. Clearly, by the New Kingdom time, that is the lower right panel, Egypt expanded its empire northbound, particularly northbound into the Palestine area, northbound into the Levant area, which is where the Jordan River runs through present-day Jordan, Israel, and Syria, and northbound into the Hittite Empire, which is really northern Syria and southern Turkey. The Egyptians invaded these areas and gained territory in them, and they also restored temples and chapels. They acquired gold mines way down south in Nubia, which is where they got their gold from. And more Egyptians believed in funeral and mortuary rituals and the cult of the dead. Now I'd like to highlight a few important pharaohs and queens. Queen Hatshepsut and her co-ruler and stepson nephew, Thutmose III, in the New Kingdom era made Egypt into a superpower. Actually, Thutmose III was too young to rule, so Hatshepsut ruled for 20 years, from 1478 to 1458 BC. Her sponsored military campaigns were very successful and acquired more land for Egypt. She also had expanded trade area into the Punt area. That is, Egyptian ships went south and went around to the east coast of Africa and traded with people around the Somalia area. And this greatly enhanced the Egyptian economy. She dressed as a man and wore a false beard and built the great temple of Deir el-Barahe, which was called the most sacred places, and is a beautiful example of ancient Egyptian architecture. It had 3 colonnaded terraces leading to a sanctuary at the very top right. And in that sanctuary, there is a quote, "He who shall do her homage shall live, he who shall speak evil of her majesty will die." That's pretty blunt. Remember, when a pharaoh's building program was large and extensive, their reign was successful and prosperous. Now, after a time, it was thought she seized her power wrongly, so her name was scratched out by other pharaohs on hieroglyphs. That is, Thutmose III and other pharaohs thereafter were a little jealous of the fact that a woman had so much power for so long. So, in order to erase her ideas and her name, they scratched it out. In this area, when you put a circle, that is, this oval area, around a pharaoh's name or a queen's name, it's called a cartouche. It kind of emphasizes the name, kind of like using all caps on your computer. Scratch her name out here, and something that she was very proud of, the Egyptian ships that went south into the Punt area, and as well as the Ankh on the ship. And we can make out now some hieroglyphs that we just learned about. The F sound for the Egyptian snake, the I or E sound for the Egyptian reed, and the zigzag for water is for what letter? Thank you. N is correct, and the vulture for the A. So, and the same thing up here, the zigzag for water N, and the reed up there. So I was wondering today, what would it be like if you played Wheel of Fortune with hieroglyphs? Then I'll take the zigzag for water for an N, and for a vowel, I'll take the vulture thing. And of course, if you get the word wrong on the show, the real vulture comes out and plucks out your eyeballs. So, they found her body and she died of an abscess tooth infection or from chemicals used to treat a skin condition or from diabetes. And this is one of the coolest pharaohs I like. An 18th dynasty king named Amenhotep IV. He changed his name to Akhenaten and made all Egyptians follow a new religion based on one god, not many gods. This was the religion of the sun god Aten, as shown below right. Akhenaten moved the capital to Amarna, which is 200 miles north of Thebes. King Tut's father was Akhenaten, and his stepmother was Nefertiti. Tut's original name was Akhenaten, after the living image of Aten, the sun god. When Akhenaten was 9, his father died, and Tut became king. Tut abandoned his father's monotheistic religion and ideas and reforms, and went back to the earlier religious ideas of polytheism. He changed his name to Tutankhamun, or the living image of Amun. Amun was an invisible god and god of the pharaohs. And he abandoned the capital Amarna, moving the capital back to Thebes. His father's utopian dream was destroyed. And Tut's chief advisor was his vizier Ai. And it was customary in those days for family to marry in their own, or for royalty to marry in their own family. This helped ensure loyalty. So at age 12, Tut married his half-sister, whose name was Akhenaten, or her life was Amun, and she was 4 years older than him. They had 2 stillborn babies. So imagine marrying your half-brother or half-sister, or even worse, marrying your brother or your sister. Gosh, I thought that only happened in Kentucky. Tut went into battle with his army, and one theory is at age 19, he fell off a chariot and was run over by another chariot. He had an open wound with a leg fracture in battle. He lived for 2 hours. His heart was crushed and could not be saved in a canopic jar. The heart or soul was a very important organ in the Egyptian afterlife. Tut's mummification process was supposed to consist of 40 days of desiccation or drying and 30 days application of oil wrapped in resins. Tut's mummification process went terribly wrong and seemed to be done in a rush. His body was badly burnt by spontaneous combustion. The linseed oil generated heat along with the linens, resins, rags, and oxygen, reaching 325 to 360 degrees. His corpse was baked, the linen wrappings were reduced to soot, and he was a charred wreck. Now, there were 5,000 afterlife possessions in his tomb. However, they were second-hand and not new. They were haphazardly arranged, just thrown in the tomb. We think Tut should not have used rooms to go for decorating, but rather should have used tombs to go. Yes, decorating is easier with tombs to go, plus Tut would have gotten 0% financing for 3,000 years. Such a deal. To put it bluntly, Tut wasn't supposed to die at age 19, as work had not started on his tomb, as he was only a teenager. The face on his iconic death mask here is really Nefertiti's face, as men had no pierced ears shown middle right. It's a rather effeminate face with high cheekbones. Tut was put into a smaller coffin, fit into a smaller sarcophagus that was actually made for his stepmom, Nefertiti. The tomb itself Tut was buried in was really made for his vizier Ai. Tut's tomb and his paraphernalia were not befit for a king. Now, in Tut's tomb, we see in the middle right, Tut holding hands with his wife, Akhenaten, and to the right of Tut, we see his father, Akhenaten, who has become Osiris, king of death, arms folded, double crown. And to the right of Osiris, we see Tut's vizier, Ai. And his vizier is performing the opening mouth ceremony on Tut, using a special instrument to open Tut's mouth to let the soul out to start the afterlife process. And so it begins. 60% of Tut's tomb was robbed by the workers who made the tomb. However, Tut's tomb was in a low-lying area and over time covered by tons of flood debris like rocks and boulders from flash flooding for centuries. Tut's tomb was really in a flash flood convergence area. This is why his tomb remained intact until 1923 when it was found by Howard Carter. By the 20th dynasty, other kings tried to erase Tut's name. They believed he wasn't a legitimate king. He didn't rule very long. They tried to dismiss him. But really, today, they really have the most knowledge of Tut over any other king. Really, Tut had the last laugh here because he's so well remembered. And whenever anybody thinks of ancient Egypt, they think of King Tut. And the Egyptians believe that once you say the person's name, the person keeps living on forever. Tut's inner coffin was 240 pounds of solid gold. His whole tomb lot was worth $1 billion. Tut had Arley-Bixler syndrome with a slightly elongated skull and underdeveloped genitalia. He probably got this from his father Akhenaten, who had Marfan syndrome with the same general characteristics. Tut had a slight cleft palate, and he may have had a club foot because there were 130 walking sticks found in his tomb. They were all slightly and gently used. Excuse me. Dr. Hawass thinks that Tut may have died from having a fractured leg in Cairo. Another theory about the way that Tut died was he had a broken leg and contracted an infection. Now, Howard Carter here is shown to the left, who found Tut's mummy, didn't realize it at the time how fragile and how delicate Tut's corpse was. So when they took Tut's mummy out of the sarcophagus, they didn't know it at the time, but they had broken off back of his back skull and a little bit of that and some upper neck bones. So when they examined Tut's body 95 years ago, they thought that he had been bludgeoned to death, that he had been murdered. Well, this idea persisted for decades until a CT scan of Tut's body reveals that his entire left torso was crushed, the upper torso, as if run over by something. But I'm not sure if this chariot idea even pans out. Tut was a sickly child, a sickly teenager who may have had a club foot. And I don't know what he'd be doing in the chariot battle. Also, with Tut, you also get the curse of the mummy. This is really just a silly urban legend in that Howard Carter, 100 years ago, started going out to Egypt on archaeological expeditions. But he needed a benefactor, an angel, someone to help him out, who was Lord Carnarvon, who was an English aristocrat. Lord Carnarvon died within 3 weeks of Tut's tomb being opened. Lord Carnarvon's brother committed suicide, and a number of other people who opened up the tomb, the workers, also died within a few years of opening it. So it's suggested by the press and to get more, to buy more newspapers, and a man named Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, that there was a curse on the tomb, that when you open a tomb up of Pharaoh, you're going to pay the price. And this really is a convergence then. This idea is the convergence of when the paranormal gets involved with sensationalism, supreme nuttiness reigns craziness. And I'll have more on this on a mini slideshow after the show if you wish to see it about this nuttiness. Tut's prime minister, became pharaoh after Tut died and ruled 6 years. Married Tut's widow. Tut's stepmother was Nefertiti, the daughter of and lived from 1370 to 1330 BC. She was the wife of Amenhotep IV, who changed his name to Akhenaten, Tut's father. Nefertiti helped promote her husband's agenda in the 18th dynasty. She was empress for many years and a good supporting queen. Nefertiti and Akhenaten were deeply in love and were cousins. The name Nefertiti means the beautiful one has come, and today she remains the icon of beauty and class. She somehow disappeared from historical records after 12 years of reign, and she was one of the most powerful women of ancient Egypt. Now, in her tomb, we see some of the characters that we have been talking about. Anubis guarding the tomb. Horus becoming ready to be the next ruler. And in the oblique angle here, we see Isis, and over here to the far left is Osiris. Now, of course, her tomb is just drop-dead gorgeous. And we see Nefertiti's tomb here, and we see Akhenaten and Nefertiti together. And just to the left of Nefertiti, we see the Ba awaiting the Ka to have an afterlife to join them together. So that's how this all figures in. Of course, her tomb was just to die for. So another ruler, Ramesses II, was born in 1303 BC and died in 1213 BC at age 90. His father was Seti I. Ramesses the Great, or Ramesses II, had 90 children, 8 wives, and 100 concubines. He was the third ruler of the 19th dynasty. Ramesses II joined his father in military campaigns where he learned to fight. He was pharaoh at age 25 when his father died. By the 13th century BC, he was a very powerful pharaoh of Egypt. He regained control of land Egypt lost in previous battles and won the Battle of Kadesh, which was the largest chariot battle ever, with 5,000 to 6,000 chariots. There were 4 divisions that he had. They were named after gods. He hired mercenaries to help him out. And there was a long, prolonged siege, which of course he won. Ramesses II expanded the Egyptian empire with military campaigns and fought the Hittites, Syrians, Liberians, and Nubians. He made a peace treaty with the Hittites to secure the northern border in northern Syria. This is it. He built the great temple of Ramesses II in Abu-Simbel. This temple was relocated when the Aswan Dam was built in the 1960s and put back together on a cliff 200 feet above the original site. In Abu-Simbel, there are 4 statues of Ramesses II, each sitting down, each 66 feet tall. He was buried in the Valley of the Kings, and he was the same king from the Bible as the one that Moses commanded to free the Israelites. In 332 BC, Alexandria the Great drove the Persians out of Egypt, and the Ptolemies line then ruled Egypt for 300 years, with the Greek general who conquered Egypt, Ptolemy, as being the first Ptolemy, and there were 14 Ptolemies to follow, and Cleopatra being the last queen and pharaoh. She was a queen, a goddess, a wife, a mother, and ruled from Alexandria, which was the capital city of ancient Egypt. Cleopatra was married at age 11 with an arranged marriage to a Ptolemy who was king, an in-law. This king died. She remarried the next king, who was also in the family of Ptolemy, and he also died. So when Cleopatra was a teenager, she was widowed twice. During her reign, the Romans took over Egypt. She was a lover of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. She did not marry Mark Antony, but had 3 children by him, 2 of them being twins. At one point, she was the richest woman in the world. Some considered her a seductress, but she also wrote about and studied law and medicine. The Roman poets made her a sinful person. The Arabs made her a philosopher, scientist, politician, and a ruler/leader. When Caesar conquered Egypt, she worked with him, had a love affair with him, and bore him a son named Caesarion. Now, when Caesar learned that Cleopatra gave birth, he quickly ran over to Cleopatra and then asked her what the weather was like outside. And Cleopatra replied, "Hail, Caesar." Caesar was 52 years old, Cleopatra was 20. Caesar was killed in 44 BC, and Cleopatra reigned from 51 BC to 30 BC. Now, when the Roman Empire won the Battle of Actium at sea, that was a major sea battle between Octavian, who was the Roman emperor, and Mark Antony. Cleopatra took her life then because Egypt lost, and Mark Antony took his life thereafter. Now, as an example of cultural imperialism, we have here at the bottom left a white Cleopatra dead on the bed, a white Mark Antony dead on the floor, and it looks like a wailing servant lady between them. This is a scene right out of Hollywood, right out of Gone with the Wind. And the only difference between this picture and the one to the bottom right was Cleopatra was married 4 times. The actress who portrayed Cleopatra in the film was married 8 times. The Egyptians placed obelisks at their entrances of their temples. The obelisks represented rays of petrified light from their sun god Ra and cast no shadow at noon. They were topped with silver or gold, and 28 obelisks remain today. They were carved from one monolithic slab of stone, and they used those balls of dolerite to shape them into obelisks. There are 6 in Egypt and 22 spread throughout the world. There's Cleopatra's Needle in Central Park, New York. That was commissioned by Cleopatra in honor of Mark Antony. There's one in Rome that weighs 280 tons. The one at the top right is in Paris, and it was given to France by Egypt. It was taken from the temple as a gift to France at the bottom down here, which is a temple in the Luxor temple that we'll be studying about in a bit. And this temple at the bottom down here was commissioned by Hatshepsut, at least the facade of it. And the one remaining obelisk is 97 feet tall and weighs 323 tons. Now, the largest obelisk in the world is the Washington Monument. And this is how they were put up. That is, they were taken backwards up a ramp and then lowered with gravity into a hole and stood upright. The Library of Alexandria consisted mostly of Greek literature and scholarly works. In its heyday, there were between 40,000 and 400,000 scrolls there. And Mark Antony actually contributed 2,000 or 3,000 scrolls himself to it. And how they got that many scrolls? Well, they were confiscated from harbors, from the Alexandria harbors, from ships. That means when you parked your boat in Alexandria, you had to pony up with some of your paper. The library was started in the 3rd century BC and existed until the Roman conquest. It was burned down by Julius Caesar in 48 BC when his ships, excuse me, this is the slide that goes with this, when his ships burned in the harbor. Another ancient wonder of the world was the Lighthouse of Alexandria, which was built in 280 BC and was called the Pharos of Alexandria. It was 350 feet tall and lit by fires at night. A broad spiral ramp led inside to the top, and it was destroyed by an earthquake in 1300 AD. In the late New Kingdom, Egypt was controlled by foreign powers, and Egypt was controlled by Nubians, Persians, and Assyrians. Now, Thebes was the capital city of the Middle Kingdom from 2040 to about 1750 BC, and it was located 350 miles south of Alexandria. The new name for Thebes is Luxor, and it has 2 important temples there we'll be talking about, the Karnak Temple and the Luxor Temple. The Karnak Temple was one of the largest and biggest religious complexes in the world. It covers over 200 acres. And it was a cult temple dedicated to the god Amun and 2 other gods. It was an acropolis for the Valley of the Kings. And here in some statues in here of Ramesses II with arms folded as Osiris, king of death. This area is so large you could put 6 or 7 of the world's largest cathedrals in the Karnak complex and still have room to put more cathedrals. In one area, called the Hypostyle Hall, it had 16 rows of columns, 134 columns and 16 rows, and each column was 45 feet in circumference. And at one time they had 80,000 servants working in here, serving Amun Ra and Karnak, and there were 5,000 statues. You can visit this on tour sites. Another temple across the way is the Luxor Temple, which was really done by 3 pharaohs in the 18th dynasty. Queen Hatshepsut, King Tut, and King Tut's grandfather, Amenhotep III. And as I said, at the top part, Hatshepsut designed the front part of the facade of this temple, and the back, other pharaohs contributed to it as it went along. And with the Luxor Temple, this is what it also looks like. And there is, between the connection between the 2 temples, the Karnak Temple and the Luxor Temple, there is the Avenue of the Sphinxes. And lastly, this is a short list of the ancient Egyptian inventions that we got. Some important ones being the 365-day calendar, number 5, the plow, and a whole bunch of cosmetic and daily things that we use in our life on a daily and personal level. And of course, the infamous number 21, toothpaste. And it's a good thing the ancient Egyptians did not invent the bicycle, other than why is this would have happened. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.